We've just reported another loan na naman from the World Bank. To what extent can we balance here the short-term needs of expensive contact tracing, much more testing, versus just trying to organically live with the virus and go back to work with all of these risks?
Well, first of all, the DOF brags about over 13.5 right now with the new World Bank loan, almost $14 billion in COVID response. I think that's more than enough to actually put in place the proper tracing infrastructure and the incentivization and health system support to strengthen quarantine and isolation. So the big problem with this attitude of the government is reopening the economy. That's not really a strategy. It's just passively ending lockdowns that shouldn't be there to begin with if we had the proper testing, tracing, quarantine, isolating. So I think it's a bit contradictory for the government to claim $13-14 billion in COVID response loans, but say at the same time, we can't afford to put in place the tracing, quarantine, and isolation infrastructure. So I think the big problem is they're being too conservative with the approach to COVID. It's not an individual behavior problem. That's part of the solution. But at the end of the day, the government has to take much more responsibility for containing COVID, not put the burden on people, not to constrict economic activity, not to stop people from going around with huge repercussions for depressing economic activity. The government hasn't learned from the past year. It's still relying on population control, controlling individual behavior like curfews, rather than sort of having a more positive way to control the spread of COVID. I mean, it's very strange that they're not actually tracing enough. The real key to controlling COVID is not the vaccines, it's not the lockdowns, it's upon good testing, having proper tracing, and then quarantining and isolating people, including incentivizing people to self-quarantine themselves. And the very, very odd thing is, this is sort of performative COVID response. You announce, you ban public displays of affection, you impose a curfew, but if we're not doing the tracing and quarantine isolating, I think we will still keep seeing this increasing problem with COVID cases. We have to reopen the economy. I mean, the depressed economic activity right now, the worsening unemployment, that's hitting the poor and middle class the most. So on that premise, the real solution really is to improve our tracing.